Chapter 12. How, after the human race had been propagated, the clamors of the just for the coming of the Redeemer increased, and likewise sin. In this night of the ancient law, God sent two morning stars as harbingers of the law of grace. The posterity and race of Adam spread out in great numbers, for the just and the unjust were multiplied. Likewise did increase the clamors of the just for the Redeemer, and the transgressions of the wicked in demerit of that benefit. The people of the Most High and the plans for the triumph of the Lord in assuming human nature were already in the last stages of preparation for the advent of the Messiah. The kingdom of sin in the generation of the wicked had now spread its dominion to the utmost limits, and the opportune time for the remedy had arrived. The merits and the crowns of the just had been multiplied. The prophets and the holy fathers, in the joy of heavenly enlightenment, perceived the approach of the salvation and the presence of the Redeemer, and they increased their clamors, beseeching God to fulfill the prophecies and the promises made to his people. Before the high throne of the divine mercy, they asked God to remember the prolix and somber night of sin, which had lasted since the creation of the first man, and the blindness of idolatry, which had taken hold of all the rest of the human race. When the ancient serpent had infected the whole earth with its poisonous breath, and apparently enjoyed peaceful control over mortals who had become blind to the light of reason and to the precepts contained in the ancient written law, when, instead of seeking the true divinity, men set up for themselves many false laws, and each one created a god for himself according to his liking, without considering that the confusion of so many gods was repugnant to all goodness, order, and peace, when by these errors, malice, ignorance, and forgetfulness of the true God had become naturalized. When, ignorant of its mortal disease and lethargy, the world had grown mute in its prayer for deliverance. When pride reigned supreme and fools had become innumerable. When Lucifer, in his arrogance, was about to swallow the pure waters of the Jordan, when, through these injuries, God was more and more deeply offended and less beholden to man, when his justice had such an excellent cause for annihilating all creation and reducing it to its original nothingness. At this juncture, according to our way of understanding, the Most High directed his attention to the attribute of his mercy, counterbalanced the weight of his incomprehensible justice with the law of clemency, and chose to yield more to his own goodness, to the clamors and faithful services of the just and the prophets of his people, than to his indignation at the wickedness and sins of all the rest of mankind. In this dark night of the ancient law, he resolved to give most certain pledges of the day of grace, sending into the world two most bright luminaries to announce the approaching dawn of the Sun of Justice, Christ our salvation. These were Saint Joachim and Anne, prepared and created by a special decree according to his own heart. Saint Joachim had his home, his family, and relations in Nazareth, a town of Galilee. He, always a just and holy man, and illumined by a special grace and light from on high, had a knowledge of many mysteries of the Holy Scriptures and of the olden prophets. In continual and fervent prayer, he asked of God the fulfillment of his promises, and his faith and charity penetrated the heavens. He was a man most humble and pure, leading a most holy and sincere life, yet he was most grave and earnest, and incomparably modest and honest. The most fortunate Anne had a house in Bethlehem, and was a most chaste, humble, and beautiful maiden. From her childhood she led a most virtuous, holy, and retired life, enjoying great and continual enlightenment in exalted contemplation. Withal she was most diligent and industrious, thus attaining perfection in both the active and the contemplative life. She had an infused knowledge of the divine scriptures and a profound understanding of its hidden mysteries and sacraments. In the infused virtues of faith, hope, and love, she was unexcelled. Equipped with all these gifts, she continued to pray for the coming of the Messiah. Her prayers were so acceptable to the Lord that to her he could but answer with the words of the spouse, "Thou hast wounded my heart with one of the hairs of thy neck." Therefore, without doubt, Saint Anne holds a high position among the saints of the Old Testament, who by their merits hastened the coming of the Redeemer.